You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective, and
Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
If you'd like to support Missing Persons and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but for every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcasts, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together, we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. On Sunday, August 6, 1989, 13-year-old Blanca Elisa Roberson, who went by Elisa, came home in the late afternoon after a sleepover at her best friend's house. Around 4:30, she got a phone call from her friend Debbie Green, who lived a few blocks away. Debbie wanted Elisa to come hang out. The two made a plan on the phone to meet at their elementary school, Kieberger Elementary, located about halfway between their homes. After some begging, Elisa's mother, Marina, allowed her daughter to walk to meet her friend. The small town they lived in, Aransas Pass, Texas, was safe. Elisa wasn't going far. The girls were meeting at a school where kids often played, and it was a sunny summer afternoon. Elisa left her house, located at 431 South Whitney, in between 4:30 and 5 p.m. Her friend Debbie waited for her 0.3 miles away at Kieberger Elementary. After some time, Debbie went home and called over to the Roberson house, probably assuming there was some miscommunication. There wasn't. Elisa had left to meet Debbie and had not come home. Elisa's family wasn't immediately worried, thinking that Elisa ran into a friend and got sidetracked. But Debbie called back a little while later and said, "I still haven't seen Elisa." When Debbie's father got home, they got in the car and started driving around the area looking for Elisa. There was no sign of her. When dusk arrived, they pulled into Elisa's family's driveway and said, "We can't find her." Ruby had been calling around to the girls' friends to see if anyone had seen Elisa. One friend, Jennifer, said she had seen Elisa walking toward the school and the two had chatted briefly, but no one knew where she'd gone after that. Marina called the Aransas Pass police at 9:49 p.m. and reported Elisa hadn't come home. Police responded and the search for Elisa began. Elisa was born January 12, 1976 in Nicaragua to her mother Marina and a father who was not part of her life. Marina met Gene Roberson, a shrimper from Texas, when he was down in Nicaragua buying a shrimp boat for his fishing company. He married Marina and adopted baby Elisa, and brought them to live with him in Aransas Pass. Elisa had two younger half-siblings, sister Ruby, just about a year younger at age 12, and little brother Tony. Gene treated Elisa as his own daughter. Marina and Gene subsequently divorced and didn't communicate much. Gene lived in Freeport and heard about his daughter's disappearance over the radio while his shrimp boat was out at sea. Elisa was a typical teen. She was into rock music and had a lot of friends, and had dated several guys in a 13-year-old way. She wasn't overly rebellious toward her mother, but she and her sister did engage in typical young teen stuff that their mom didn't know about, like pranking people and going places they weren't supposed to. Elisa and Ruby did a lot of things together, and Elisa was very protective of her younger sister if someone bullied or teased her. Elisa, who was 5 feet tall and 120 pounds, had brown eyes and brown shoulder-length hair. She had a scar on her right knee and one on her left thigh, and pierced ears. She was last seen wearing a light blue Mickey Mouse Florida t-shirt and blue culotte-style shorts and sneakers. After Elisa failed to come home that first night, the police took her disappearance seriously. She was not considered a likely runaway. Aransas Pass Police Lieutenant Linda Thompson, who was acquainted with the family prior to Elisa going missing, said, quote, "There were no problems with her mother. She seemed happy, and she had not discussed with her friends the possibility or probability of running away," end quote. Aransas Pass PD launched a full-scale search for Elisa. They scanned the town from the air in a helicopter looking at outlying areas. They used Boy Scout explorers to conduct a door-to-door search throughout the town of about 8,000 residents. A search and rescue group searched Aransas Pass for 15 hours over 2 days. Using 6 tracking dogs they exposed to Elisa's scent from items of her clothing. The dogs were able to track Elisa to the school, and her scent continued a little way past the school to 8th Street, and then they lost the trail. The police checked into tips from callers who said they might have seen Elisa at various places around town that day, and they spoke with a neighbor girl named Jennifer who lived across the street. Jennifer saw and spoke with Elisa that day as she was walking by. This was at the corner of Goodnight and South Whitney. Elisa was walking west toward the school, which was on Goodnight. There was another sighting of Elisa, one the family puts a lot of stock in. The boy who reported this sighting knew Elisa and was certain it was she he saw. And what he saw was Elisa getting into a maroon car. Family abduction was ruled out very quickly. Her adoptive father, Gene, was not believed to have been involved at all. By a week out, kidnapping was the predominant theory. Lieutenant Thompson said to the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, quote, "It's 4:30 or 5 o'clock in broad daylight on a Sunday afternoon. People are home and she just comes up missing," end quote. Her father, Gene, told the Caller-Times that they had no clues whatsoever as to what had happened to Elisa. "It's like she was picked up by a flying saucer," he said. Marina set up a shrine to her daughter in a room in her house. Young Ruby called it a room full of angels. Ruby stopped sleeping in the bedroom the 2 girls shared. By November, the police had investigated numerous tips and leads. People called in that Elisa was sold into sex slavery, what we would now call trafficking, in Dallas or Mexico. Her case was entered into state and national crime databases and the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which would go on to become NCMEC, and had been reported to the FBI and the Texas Rangers. Her family had started a fund to hire a PI and still keeps in touch with the PI to this day. 5 years later, police had done everything they could think of. They consulted a psychic who contacted the Aransas Pass PD and said she had some ideas, driving around the town with her to see if she could help. Her visions came to nothing. Elisa's mom, Marina, had a suspect in mind from day one. This was the man who was the father of her youngest son, Alex, who was just 5 years old when Elisa disappeared. The man, named Ralph, a drug dealer, had been violent and abusive throughout his and Marina's relationship, and when she finally left him, he threatened her and her family. Police traveled to Mexico to meet this man, a Mexican national, in prison. He had an alibi, having been in prison on the day Elisa was taken. For reasons you'll hear, the family still suspects Ralph's involvement, even though the police have ruled him out. The Aransas Pass police instead favored another suspect, a man who lived in the area and was the father of one of Elisa's friends. They have not released anything about this suspect, but there is some indication that the man may have been a sex offender or predator known to the police. He has never been charged in Elisa's case, but he is still considered a possible suspect in her disappearance. Crime Stoppers offered a $1,000 reward for information in Elisa's case after she went missing. And NCMEC ran Elisa's photo on the back of a Montgomery Ward catalog, which generated calls from all over the U.S. One call from Georgia sounded promising, as a deputy sheriff thought Elisa might have been employed by the pool company cleaning his pool. It wasn't her. A Jane Doe found in Chula Vista, California was not Elisa either, as proven by dental record comparisons. A young woman seen at a church in Arizona wasn't Elisa. In October 1989, Captain Mike Thompson of the Aransas Pass PD arranged for a former FBI forensic sketch artist, who now worked with NCMEC, to create a computerized sketch of what Elisa might look like at age 18, based on photos of her siblings, and her parents. The NCMEC flyer with her images is headlined, "Non-Family Abduction." The images were bulk mailed to 57 million homes across the country and distributed to law enforcement agencies throughout the U.S. Marina said she was hopeful that someone would recognize Elisa and they would bring her home, alive or not. 60 tips came in, 13 of which the police felt merited follow-up. One involved police going to a school in North Carolina and finding a girl who looked so much like the age-progressed photo that they actually looked into the school records to figure out whether she was Elisa. She wasn't. Another led them to follow up on a Jane Doe in Tulsa, who was subsequently identified and was not Elisa either. In 2001, KRIS-TV received an anonymous letter accompanied by a map. The letter claimed the map would lead to Elisa, but Captain Thompson said the map was too general to lead police to a specific location. In 2005, there was temporary hope that Elisa had been found when human skeletal remains were discovered in Aransas County. But it wasn't Elisa, as evidenced by comparison of her dental records to the skull. Soon after the abduction, the family moved to Idaho Falls, Idaho. Marina said she could not live in Aransas Pass anymore, as she was too afraid someone would take her other children. She was concerned that the man she had broken things off with, Alex's father Ralph, knew where to find the family. So she arranged for them to leave the area covertly, boarding a plane without telling anyone that they were leaving town. Aransas Pass PD Captain Kyle Rhodes took up the case in 2013 and said he was reinvestigating it from square one. He said the 1989 investigation didn't do some things that were protocol in missing children's cases, such as the family wasn't interviewed for a long time, he said. It seems he felt that the home the family had occupied when Elisa went missing had never been searched properly. In 2016, the home, from which the family had moved more than 30 years earlier, was searched by Texas EquiSearch and with ground-penetrating radar. They were focused on a concrete slab and a carport for reasons they would not share with the family. Captain Rhodes said, quote, "We explored some areas mentioned in the initial reports. With the technology and with dogs, we actually cleared a field with a backhoe and did a lot of pre-extensive searching. I believe we've moved this case forward in a lot of ways," end quote. Around the same time, in 2016, the Aransas Pass PD and a Texas Ranger requested that Marina and Ruby come in for an interview, and the family felt that it turned into an interrogation. They were told that evidence had been found in the home and an arrest was imminent. It's unclear whether the investigators were trying to scare the women to elicit a confession, but no evidence was revealed and no arrests were forthcoming. That was 7 years ago. The family has reconciled itself that they may never know what happened to Elisa. A granite memorial with a lighthouse and dolphins jumping engraved on it says, "In memory of Elisa Roberson and for all the lost children, may they find their way back home." It has no dates. It was placed as a marker in front of Kieberger Elementary. Tragically, Tony died of suicide in prison in Alaska. Elisa's adoptive father, Gene, moved to Alaska and passed away in 1998. Ruby and Marina still suffer from the emotional trauma of Elisa being abducted, and Marina took to blaming herself. On the 30th anniversary of Elisa going missing, her mom, Marina, told KRIS-TV, quote, "Not a day goes by that I don't think about my missing child. Not a day," end quote. Mike Morford sat down to talk with Ruby Hall, Elisa's sister, about Elisa's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Ruby, and thank you for coming on Missing Persons to discuss your sister Elisa's case with us.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on and giving me this opportunity to talk about my sister's case.
Yeah, and I know your family have been searching for answers here for over 3 decades.
Yeah.
And sadly, those answers are eluding you and your family. we're going to talk about what we know, what we don't know in this case. But before we dive into that, can you tell listeners a little bit about your sister and what she was like?
Yeah. So my sister was about a year and a half older about a year older than I was. And so I was 12, she was 13. So she was the older sister, and there were three other siblings under her. So she was like the mini mama, always the mother hen, always making sure, when we were out playing, that we weren't getting into any trouble. And if we were being picked on or anything like that, she was always the first one to step in and protect us if we had like a neighborhood bully or something. She was the fun, popular sister. She had a lot of friends. My sister was born in Nicaragua, and so she came to the States as a baby. My dad adopted her. He wasn't her biological dad, but when he married my mom, he adopted her, so she became his. And so we all ended up in Aransas Pass, Texas. And so she was born in 76. I was in 77. And then we had a brother, Tony, in 78. We were in close succession, and then another little brother in 84. So she was the oldest, and she was the cool sister. She had to repeat a grade because her first language was Spanish. And so she was held back a year. So her and I were both in the same grade, and that was kind of fun and exciting. And you know how sisters are, we did have some fights and disagreements, but the main thing all the time, I was always with her. It seemed we were always together, unless she was hanging out with her older friends. But there were times that I just wanted to be with her so bad because she was so cool. And sometimes she'd get annoyed, but for the most part, we were always hanging out, and we all had the same friends and had the same group. And so she was the cooler big sister that listened to the cool bands when I was stuck with New Kids on the Block, she was listening to like the badass bands from the 80s, like the big hair bands, Metallica, Poison, Lita Ford, all the big ones. And she would play those tapes over and over again. And I just remember us listening to them, getting the words down, and just dancing and singing. And she was just a lot of fun. And I wonder what my life would have been like had she still were around today. Like,
probably missed out on a lot of close sister opportunities to share your children and marriages and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
definitely I can see that leaving a void in your life. Trying to get a sense of, what she was like. Was she sort of, rebellious at all? Was she, very close with the family, that kind of thing? Or did she have maybe a wild side at all?
The reason I laughed is because I think back, or I smiled. I think back of all the crazy stuff that we did so much crazy stuff. And I'm sure if my mom knew half of the stuff we did, she would die. But it seemed like we were always together, and we were doing things like, maybe she had a rebellious streak. I think we were all just a little crazy. But we would do things like, where we grew up, we had the bayfront. There's where a lot of shrimpers and shrimp boats come in, and it's probably not the best place for little kids to be hanging out. And I remember we would get on our bikes. We were always on our bikes. And sometimes my sister I'd be on the back and she'd be pedaling, and I'd be, the pegs where you can get a ride, and they just, and so I'd be on the back with her, and she'd be taking me. We'd go all kinds of places we probably shouldn't have been. And I remember thinking, like, as long as I have my big sister with me, I'm okay. Like, my big sister can take on anything. Like, she just seemed like she didn't put up with crap. And she was 13, but she seemed like this tough little kid, right? And anytime we had, like I was telling you earlier about kids bullying us or trying to mess with us, she was the first one to kind of step in and say, like, leave my brother alone or leave my sister alone. And she was 13, so she was at that age where boys were starting to, coming into her radar, and boys liked my sister. They were all, she had one boyfriend. She had a lot of boyfriends, and I was kind of jealous too. But so she was at that age where she was dating, hanging out with friends, going to the movies, all kinds of, fun things. And I guess there was a little bit of jealousy because I just wish I could be as cool as her. And so I guess in a way, I remember she didn't, there wasn't a lot of contention at home in terms of, I'm sure they fought, my mom and her, because of course she was 13, and, but as far as like a lot of contention, like in the home or between my mom and her, it didn't seem like that was a big issue at the time. So I guess it's subjective, like what you would say, but I don't think she seemed like she was still involved with a lot of the same friends I was in, and I didn't see a lot of like she seemed to have like a lot of good friends, I guess is a that kind of had the same trying to stay out of trouble. But of course we did all kinds of little things on the side that we probably shouldn't have been doing, like toilet papering houses or throwing eggs at people's houses. So I guess that could be, I don't know, a little bit depending on the
young teen type stuff at misadventures, I guess.
Yeah.
I did see a description of her that I think it was your family that described her as being immature for her age.
I think it was a typo.
Okay, because I was wondering what that meant. Was she like, she didn't look her age, or was it because she was maybe acted younger than her age? Okay.
I think what my mom, her second language was English. And so I think what she meant to say was that she was mature for her age. And I don't know if it was a typo or if they misunderstood her, because I read that and that has always bothered me to this day. Like that just made her sound like it just made her sound really bad, or I just don't like the description that they, so I just honestly, I think it was either a typo or maybe my mom said the wrong word, meaning mature, but she said immature by accident. I'm sorry. I'm trying to turn off my phone. So it just is what I think is what happened.
Okay. So I want to go forward to the day she went missing, August 6th, 1989. Your family had gone to church that day. I'm curious, was the church going on Sundays? Was that a regular thing?
No. So let me turn off my phone so it doesn't, I apologize. It's kind of a unique situation. So there was a group of us kids in that neighborhood, and some of those kids we had, some were going, there was a Catholic church, and my mom was Catholic growing up. So we had a little bit of Catholic influence. We had a little Mormon friend in that area in the neighborhood, and we had a lot of the First Assembly of God Church. So we had a few different churches, and in each of those churches, we had some of our friends. So it was like a lot of the friends and people in the neighborhood, we were friends. And sometimes we would have some friends that would say, hey, you want to come to church with me? I'm going to church. You want to come with me? I was going to church with a friend who happened to be Mormon, and the Mormons got a hold of me. I got converted. I'm not Mormon anymore, but my sister went to the First Assembly of God Church, and I used to go with her to that one too. And my sister's best friend, Charla, they always went together. They always went to church together. And she had spent the night before at Charla's house. So it was Saturday night. And then that afternoon, because they had morning church and afternoon church, or afternoon or whatever time it was. And I guess Charla wanted to go to church, but Elisa didn't want to go to church. That was about 4:00. And so Charla says, well, I'm going to go to church. And then Elisa came home. And so by that time she got home, it was about 4:30. And then she got a call from another little friend. Her name was Debbie Green. And Debbie had asked if she could come and hang out with her. And she'd asked my mom if she could go back out. And my mom told her, it's getting late. You've already been out. You already spent the night. Were already with your friend all day. You need to stay home. And she just, please mom, can I go? And then she said, Debbie will meet me halfway. And that's when my mom says, well, if she's going to meet you halfway, you can go and play or hang out for a little bit, but you need to come home like in a couple of hours or whatever the time frame was. And so she had told Debbie she would meet her halfway. And it was it's about 8 blocks, if not more, from our home to where Debbie lived. And in the meeting spot was an elementary school, Kieberger Elementary School. And that's where they would usually meet. That was a place a lot of kids met in that area and neighborhood. We'd go to the playground to Kieberger Elementary. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the time frame because it was so long ago, but I would say it would have taken her maybe 15 minutes to get from our house to the school. And then for Debbie to get there, so 15 minutes. Well, then she calls us. So I would assume 15 minutes to get there, 15, 20 minutes. Elisa's not there. She goes back to her house and she calls us because that was before cell phones. And she calls our house and I pick up the phone and I feel bad because that day my sister and I were fighting. I don't know what we were fighting about. We were mad at each other. We were just upset. And I remember saying when Debbie called and she said, "Where's Elisa? She's not here. Did she already leave?" And I said, "Debbie, I don't know. And I don't care. Leave me alone. I was just irritated." And my mom in the background heard me or must have heard that I was talking to Debbie and Debbie was asking me. And my mom said, "Elisa should be there already. What is she talking about? Elisa should be there already." And I got off the phone. I said, "Mom, she said she wasn't there. She's not there." And she was, "Well, she should be there. She's probably," all we thought at the time was she got sidetracked maybe. And that she was visiting with another friend or whatever. We thought it was just going to pan out. She would find her there and they'd end up going back to Debbie's house. Well, a short time later, if I remember right, she calls our house again and asks, she says, "Elisa's still not here. We can't find her. Or she's not there. She's not here. Is she there?" I'm like, "Well, she's not here." And I guess you start kind of worrying about that time, right? Because nobody can find her. And she says, "Well, my dad's coming home. And when he comes home, when he gets off work, he can take us driving around so we can look for her." And so I guess her dad came home. She was with another little friend too, because her friend was at her house at the time. And I guess they drove around. I don't remember the time frame, but at some point there was still light out, but it was getting dark. Debbie and her dad and her little friend pull into the drive into our house, and they said, "We haven't seen her. We can't find her." And that's when he told my mom, Miss Roberson, "You need to call the police." And well, before that, let me back up a little bit. I started calling some of our friends in the neighborhood. And so I called a couple of friends. We had a few that we hung out, Holly and Jennifer and a few other people. I called asking, if Elisa was there by chance. I called her best friend and nobody knew where she was. Nobody had seen her since, and then at that point, when Mr. Green and Debbie came to our house, they just said, "You know what, it's time for you to call the police." And I looked at the original police report. It says that if I remember right, I think she called like at 9. I think it was 9:00 by the time she called. And then of course a police officer came to our home and just took a police report. And then that was like the beginning of the 34-year nightmare that just never has ended.
And I want to go back and recap too, to let listeners know how close this was. So the school I map quested, and it was actually 0.3 miles from your house. So the
Okay.
walking time was about 6 minutes, which makes
Okay.
which makes it an even more of a mystery because it's a shorter distance she would have had to walk to get there. And it's important because that school was north. I'm looking, visualizing, it was northwest of where you lived.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get into a witness that supposedly saw her southwest of where you live. But, I want to talk a little bit about that night when the police came out, and how was it treated? Did they say, oh, she's probably goofing off or having fun with friends, or she ran away? What was her initial, or were they concerned right away that something really did happen?
I don't know that they were concerned. I remember it was, I wish I could remember the name of the officer that came out, but I don't feel like they were really as concerned as they should have been. And I think for some reason, it seems like in all these stories that you hear of kids that gone missing in the 80s and 70s, it was always the cop was, oh, they ran away, or they're with their boyfriend, or they're going to come home. It was like this. They were very, it felt a little, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, but it felt a little bit like there wasn't as much urgency, just a little dismissive, or she'll be home. She'll be home by the end of the night. If she's not home, then call us or come in. And so that's how I felt. I felt like the family were the ones kind of panicking because we know our family member. My mom, my mom knows her daughter. I know my sister. She was 13, but she wasn't irresponsible. She never ran away. She wasn't doing drugs. She wasn't running wild. She wasn't having like these, a lot of things that some people get mixed up in, with the drugs and the drinking and the boyfriend. She was still she was still young. She was still like a kid. She wasn't involved in like any thing that you would think, she's running away with a boyfriend or so we knew her. I knew Elisa. I knew her. I mean, I was with her all the time. It seemed like I knew her boyfriends. I knew her friends. And so she just, if she wanted to go see a boyfriend or visit a boyfriend, she'd go visit a boyfriend. Like if she wanted to see her friend, she wasn't spoiled, but she was 13 and my mom, let her, she was responsible enough that she could go and come back. And so we all knew something was wrong early on. You just get this pit in your stomach that something, you just know as the family, you just feel it. You just know something's not right. And it just, that pit just keeps getting heavier and heavier just in your stomach. Like you just feel it in your chest and stomach. And it was the next day, I remember. So Detective Linda Thompson and Mike Thompson were, Linda, I think, was the first one that talked to us. She was the detective in Aransas Pass at that time, one of the detectives, I should say. And she tells, we're still in communication, and she tells me the moment that I saw, because she knew my mom, it's a small town, and she knew that she had 3 little kids and she was on her own, and and Elisa was her translator. So Elisa learned very young. She was my mom's mouthpiece, right? So my mom didn't speak the language. So everywhere my mom went, she took Elisa with her. So at a very young age, here's my sister doing a big person thing. So she just always knew Elisa was always with her anytime she saw my mom and us kids. And that moment that she stepped in, she said, and I saw that Elisa wasn't with your mom. I knew something was wrong because where's your sister? She goes, your mom always had your sister with her when she came in to talk to, for whatever reason, every time I saw her, she was with her. And she said that when I saw her, the moment I saw her, it was as if I was kicked by a horse, because she said it was so, I felt I felt what your mom was feeling in that moment, how panicked and how like distraught she was. And so we went in that morning or day, probably in the morning, and talked to the police. And I remember the police asking me as this little 12-year-old kid asking me a lot of questions. And I remember them asking my mom, of course, a lot of questions, my brother, or brothers, of course, Debbie and her dad. And so it just, and then everything kind of, the floodgates, everything came open after that. Just everything kind of.
Yeah. And, obviously the one of the things the police want to do is they want to go out, look for people that saw her, that found her, talk with her, that kind of thing. And, it did come to light that someone reported seeing Elisa and possibly talking to her, at least one person.
Yes.
And this was a neighbor who saw her reportedly at the corner of Greenwood and South Whitney, which this is important because that is in the complete opposite direction, as I mentioned earlier. Can you tell us about that interaction, what you know about that interaction and her seeing her there?
That was, if I'm remembering right, that was Jennifer. Jennifer was just right across the street, and she was actually, her house was heading, and I don't know my bearings because I'm not looking at a map, and I don't live in Aransas Pass anymore, so I don't know what north, south, west, east is, but her house was heading in the direction of Kieberger Elementary. So it was on the corner of Greenwood or not Greenwood. I don't know where people get Greenwood from. It was Goodnight Street. Someone else mentioned Greenwood too, but it was Goodnight Street is the street that Kieberger Elementary School is on. So Jennifer lived on the corner of Whitney and Greenwood Street. So you're the second person that said Greenwood. Kieberger Elementary. Kieberger Elementary is on Goodnight Street.
Okay. So that might be where that's coming from then. If it's, maybe it was reported incorrectly in the news or something. If it was, if it was Greenwood and Whitney, that would be a big difference because it is in the opposite direction of the school. But if you're right and it's a different street and then they just put the name incorrectly, then maybe that's why.
I'd have to look on a map if I'm able to look at a map, then I can, or at least know what street Kieberger Elementary School is on, because Kieberger goes a whole, it actually encompasses another, this might make sense because it takes up quite a few, it's on where it's so big, one side of it might be Greenwood. And maybe that's where the confusion comes in, because it spans a few different blocks, and so that would make sense why some people say Greenwood. But she was here. Let me just look this up if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking on my end too because I think this is a important possibly. It would be a big difference if it was the street that actually is connected to the school versus the one that's in the opposite direction.
I'm sorry.
I'm sort of looking myself here.
Goodness sake, my phone is Kieberger. Okay, so it's on Goodnight Street, 748 Goodnight Street. But you're the second person that has mentioned Greenwood. And I had to remind that person too. I said, no, she would have been walking because that was the route we always took, was always Goodnight Street. We always took that route. It was like the back of our hands. So you just turn off. And I don't, without looking at a map here, let me look.
And we know that
Jennifer,
news reports aren't always accurate, unfortunately.
Oh, so can I tell you? I've gone the gambit of things that are put in, information that's put in wrong, incorrectly, facts that are, you name it, I've heard it, all kinds of things, even outrageous things. And I think I don't understand where people get that. It's like the rumor mill, or they hear one little thing, and that's what has caused problems throughout the years. You hear one little thing, and then there's no way to undo the things that are said or the things that are put out. Once that information is put out, it's like frozen in time, and it's hard to get rid of it. And that's something I've run into in 34 years is things that people say or information getting mixed up, or this gets a little skewed, and then it gets more skewed, and then pretty soon you have a story that's not, when people come back and say certain things, you're like, that's not how it happened. Like, I was there that day. And so you have all these, throughout the years. And then of course there's no way to undo it, and there's no way to fix the mistakes once they're put out. And so she definitely went down Goodnight Street, and the friend that witnessed, that talked to her, would have been Jennifer Taylor. She was her house was right there on the corner of Goodnight and Whitney, and they saw her. Because when we went looking for her around the neighborhood, we were knocking on all our friends' doors, of people who we knew. Excuse me. And she was one of the ones that we knocked on her door, and we asked, have you seen, or called, but we also knocked, have you seen Elisa? Well, yeah, we saw her. She was walking past here, at such and such time, and she walked past, and we just said hi. Jennifer's little brother was really good friends of Elisa. They were on again, off again, boyfriend, girlfriend. So they knew Elisa very well. She spent a lot of time over there, so they knew her. And our neighbor, Mr. Barker, who was just right next door to us, he said his wife saw her when she was walking out. And I don't know if they ever got that. I never ever seen it on any really official reports. But when we went back to visit him in 2009, we went back to the town, and I went to visit him and his wife. He had said that his wife was washing dishes, and the way her house faced her window, there was a window above the sink. You could see everything that was going on at our house. And so he said that when his wife was washing dishes, he saw Lisa that day walking out the door and going onto the street. And
that's very important that you clarify that, because that would make a big difference, because in the opposite direction now we're wondering, why is she walking over there? But it seems like she is walking where she's supposed to be. There's a witness right there, but she doesn't make it to the school. So she is in the area where she should be walking, but during that short 6-minute walk, something happens to her. Now, I did want to touch on, eventually there's a search with dogs, and the dogs trailed her to the school, the scent. But at the same time, her friend didn't see her at the school. Did they ever explain that? What might have happened with that?
Well, they caught her. They caught her scent right past the school. So there was without looking on the map, there's a street. Once you pass, so here's the school, and once you walk all the way past the school, what I imagine probably happened was Elisa got to the school, Debbie wasn't there, so she thought, well, I'll keep walking. I might as well keep walking, right? She's heading in the same direction. So the dogs followed her scent to the end of that road. Here, let's see if I can pull up the map, then I can remember what the name of it was, but that's where they followed. There we go. So she would have walked all the way to the end of, what's the name of that street? 8th Street. She would have walked, that's where they followed her scent, was to 8th Street, and that's where her scent stopped. So what I think happened, she got to the school before Debbie did, and then she decided she was going to keep walking, and then somewhere at 8th Street was when she met her, like,
whatever happened there. Yeah, which is, and then it makes it more bizarre, because you've got people that know her that see her on her way,
Mhm.
and her friends coming to the school but doesn't see her. So there's just this very small, short area
Mhm.
where it seems something could have happened, yet nobody saw anything.
Well, there was one person, and you'll have to. I always hate bringing up stuff like this because throughout the years there's so much information that comes in, but at the time, and I think I know who this person was, who the witness was, but without clarifying it again, but I'm pretty sure who the witness was another friend of ours who lived on Goodnight Street, who also saw Elisa, and he had mentioned seeing Elisa get into a maroon car. So that was another one of those things you don't hear or see a lot about, because that's something I don't think anybody really, it's one of those things you're like, some things were followed up with, but then I think you get tunnel vision, or police officers get tunnel vision, and so they follow one lead. And there was reason to believe what they were thinking at the time, because we were surrounded by, it was the 80s, and you think you're safe in a small town, and the people who are nice you don't realize are really, pedophiles or predators in disguise. And so there are a few people that that in our circle that we've come to realize could have been any one of them, but there's never been any hard evidence, or now 34 years later what can be done. And and I hesitate, and I just have to be very careful, because I don't want to I don't want to get myself into any trouble. But I think it's just there's one person likely that we think that we believe, my mom and I believe, was involved, but the original investigators believed it was someone else, and they still to this day believe it's still that person, and either one of them could have done it, and we'll never know. We just know they were both could have been capable of it. And it's just sad that anyway.
And so you think that maroon car tip was a reliable tip?
He was a good, if my memory serves me right, I think I know the friend who made that, but I won't say any, because I don't want to say yes or no and be wrong. I'd rather give information right than give it wrong, and then try to, because I know what it feels like to give information when someone gives the information wrong, and it affects the whole family. People don't understand that their words, the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I mean, words can hurt people, and words can destroy families, and words can also affect an investigation, and words can, you have to be careful with what you say. And so I do think that friend was a reliable source, and I do believe him, and he was a friend of ours. And, but I don't know that how much it was really followed up. There's always rumors and things, but 34 years, you wish you would have, always look back, and I wish I could, I remember things, and things I might forget, then my memory is triggered and it comes back to me. But for the most part, 34 years, sometimes you remember the basics, but there's always little things. And then throughout the years, you try to wonder, well, was that a rumor, or was that something followed up? And so I try to stay in close contact when it comes to things like this with my, I had mentioned Linda and Mike Thompson were two of the main detectives on the case in 1989. And she's got a pretty sharp memory and remembers a lot of things. And so
along those lines, the possibility she did get in a car, is she the type of person that would have gotten a car with a stranger?
No, it would have been someone she knew. And we think, it would have been someone she knew. Okay.
So I know, and maybe this is the person you're talking about, but I know your mom, it was reported, I think this is on Charlie Project, that has some information about your sister, that your mom dated a violent and abusive man who was involved in the drug trade, and she believes this man was responsible for her disappearance. is that the person that you think it was? Is he someone that had an alibi?
So that is one of the that's who she thought and believed from day one. Throughout the years, when you get told something else, and when and I believe and I trust and respect Linda Thompson and everything she has to say, and she has a lot of credibility, so, but it always makes you wonder. You start to question, well, could it have been this person? So you don't ever try to close out anybody or anything, because that's when you get that little tunnel vision, and you don't try to see anything outside that. But yeah, my mom had a boyfriend, a very, he was very abusive, and she finally was able to leave him. And it was at the time that she had left him that she had, that he had threatened her and told her that he would do something to her, something that would make him remember her for the rest of her life, to remember him for the rest of her life. And so she thought that he was going to take her youngest son, Alex. He was our little brother. He was that was his son. And so my mom was protecting him. She thought he's going to try to take Alex, our little brother. And so she was guarding him like a hawk, making sure, just in case if he tried to take him when she wasn't looking. And when this happened, she just automatically said that was who it was. And so he was dangerous enough and scary enough that he could have done it, hands down. He was involved in I don't even know how we survived being, honestly, as kids, and the things that he did to us and to my mom. I don't know how we survived it. I really don't. We must have had some angels watching over us, but he was totally capable of doing something like that. In terms of an alibi, Linda can tell you. So Linda Thompson, at the time, the detectives went to Mexico, and supposedly he was in a jail at the time in Mexico. But he had a brother who was a Mexican prison guard, and he was involved in some really, really shady stuff. And so all you have to do is you give the right price, anything can be done. If you give someone some money and say, hey, let me, can I just look like I'm here in prison, jail? So very, very possible that could have happened. So that is why we have a hard time, even though we know and believe that when they went there, they saw that he was there, and they came back and said that was the alibi. It's, those type of people like that have money and are dangerous, that they can make anything happen. And so,
yeah. And it's frustrating. You've got somebody that you think it could be. The police looked at somebody, but at the end of the day, nobody was ever arrested.
Right.
Still don't have answers. I want to flash forward in time. I know that your family at one point was trying to raise funds for a private investigator. I'm curious, did you ever hire one, and did that private investigator make any progress?
Yeah, I still talk to him today. We're still talking today. I don't want to, I can't, of course I don't want to
jeopardize
anything.
Information.
So
okay.
I don't want to say anything. So I'm just gonna, he's it's always interesting. Things kind of slow down for a long time, and there's not really much going on. And then all of a sudden it starts to kick up again. And the only thing I can say is when things start kicking up and you start digging and you start questioning and asking and thinking, and it feels like more information kind of, but I mean, he's been really good to work with, and he's been, I think he's kind of seeing things from the outside because he's not in the family. He's outside of the family. I mean, he's not in the family, he's outside. And so it's kind of nice when you have someone from the outside who kind of, who can see it's, from a different perspective. Sometimes when you're too close to it, it's easy to get emotional about it. So that's what's been nice, is to have someone from the outside to kind of ask questions logically and to bring up different ideas or scenarios, or, ask questions about. So he's, yeah.
He's been digging. That's good.
Mhm.
I do want to ask you about two events that happened years after Elisa went missing. One thing was an anonymous letter that came in saying that where to look for her. Another thing was a search that was done of a home. I don't know if it was the home you guys were living in at the time she went missing, or a home you lived in before, but there was also a search done of that home for some reason. I'm curious, can you talk about both that anonymous letter and that search of the home?
Yeah. I don't know much about the anonymous letter. I think that was somewhere in the early 2000s. I don't know if it's been a while since I've looked at that.
2001, I think it was 2001.
Okay. There was a letter that was sent to the police department. You'd have to ask them, because honestly, I'm going to be honest, they oh God, I almost feel like we are a nuisance to them. I honestly feel like we are nobodies. Let's just call it for what it is. We are the family, and this is our sister and daughter, but as far as and I understand, believe me, I know I'm old enough to know that I know that there are some things that, as investigators, when there's an open case, there are things that can't be divulged. I totally get that. But we're talking 34 years of a cold case that they say is open but inactive. And of course, that's now 2001. It was still, I don't feel like really much has been done. The things that have been done have only made things worse, is how I see it. And I've gotten to the point where they're not there to, and I get it. They're there to do a job. They're supposed to advocate for, or they're supposed to solve a crime, but we advocate for our family member. She's my sister. She's my, ultimately we want to solve the crime, but they don't give us any information. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it's like pulling teeth trying to get any kind of information from them. And when I call to talk to them just for an honest conversation, hey, it's her annual anniversary, I will call to get an update. And I always feel so defeated. I get off the phone and I cry because I feel so defeated. I feel like I'm taking time away from his day for more important things than to be talking about my sister. And it's very, it makes you feel very defeated. But I don't know whatever happened about that letter. They don't give us any information. And so that was about, you'd have to ask them. But the thing in 2016, I'm still very hurt and upset about, because we went down there and we thought it was important. We're EquiSearch. I don't even know. It was some kind of shit show. I'm going to be honest. It was some kind of shit show. When people call a court kangaroo, I'm so sorry. I'm going to just be honest. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's your story and your experience.
It's like it was like a kangaroo court. And it's like, it felt like, who are these people? I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but who are the people running the show? Like, it was an absolute shit show. And by the time we were done, so of course they have to search all places. I get it. I understand it. You have to search from the beginning. Whereas the beginning, she was at home at our house. So they searched our home at that time. And I don't fault anyone for that. That's what has to be done. But they were very open, talking to the family, and then EquiSearch, Texas EquiSearch, very open and talking to us. And then all of a sudden there was a point where they just stopped talking to us. And we thought, what is going on here? And it felt like we were sabotaged. It was some weird, we don't know what happened. In the end, I came back and the police department had asked us if we could just go in and talk to them again and just go through the events of that day, just to kind of freshen a new set of eyes. And the Texas Ranger, Tony DeLuna, came. And so they asked us to come and talk to him, my mom and I. And so we went in thinking, all we're going to do is talk to them, go down kind of the timeline of what happened that day. By the time we were done, I honestly felt, in hindsight's 2020, I think we were being interrogated. And I wish we were smart enough to say, this is done. We're done with this. But when you're so desperate to find answers and you want your child or your sister's disappearance to be solved, I don't care who I'm talking to. We were both there. You tell us where we need to be, what time, and we were there. And we were there. And we were there the whole time. And by the time we were done, I felt like, I honestly felt like, was that an interrogation? It feels like, is it time to get an attorney? Because it honestly felt like we were being accused of my sister's disappearance. I thought, they flat out told me that this is what they believed, that I knew something and that my mom was somehow involved. And so we left there feeling very defeated. We knew who our friends were. We knew who our enemies were. The line was drawn right in the sand. And they searched our house and supposedly said they found some evidence in our old house from 34 years ago. And to this day, I don't know. To this day, I don't know what evidence they supposedly found that they said was going to lead to an arrest within days, it sounded like. And if it was that important and that serious, and if they really found this evidence, that was 6 years ago.
Nothing's happened. And it almost doesn't make sense, because if they're saying something happened in that house, mm-hmm. then how did the neighbors see her, the multiple people see her walking that day? And supposedly, if the Maroon car tip is correct, well, how does that fit in with her never leaving the house? So, I understand. I don't know. I understand they want to look at every angle, and in a lot of cases, people closest to the victims are involved. I mean, it's just a fact. 100%. So I understand why they want to look that way. But
I understand
at the same time, when you have glaring eyewitnesses, multiple ones that see her walking, it doesn't fit with what they're thinking. So
three outside of the home, three inside the home.
So I get why they would want to cover all the bases, but at the same time, they've got to be reasonable and say, okay, this doesn't add up with the multiple witnesses we have that see her walking. So it's just very, very unfortunate. You have to sort of get that suspicion cast on you, I think, unnecessarily.
That's what's been so frustrating. They said something about, and that's in one of those other rumors that I don't know where it came from. I don't know where the information came from. They said we had an open carport at our home at the time, and at some time along the way that concrete was poured. But when we were living at that house, we had 2 finished garages. Concrete was already poured. There was no open carport. I don't know where they're getting this, but they will not listen to me. I have till I'm blue in the face trying to explain. If there was a carport or open carport, it was years after we moved out. So this is something else we've tried to tell them. And once it's out there, it's out there. And so now our family gets, their suspicion is already cast on the family, rumors. And we've had, I've to the point where I've had people harassing me really, really bad, where I had to get an attorney to help me, basically a cease and desist, because there were a few people that were harassing me. It was just really bad and awful from that whole event in 2016. And I wish I would have been smarter, wiser, older. I would have done things so much differently, and I would never have let the Texas Rangers and the police do what they did to my mom that day. My mom, I don't even know how she's standing today with all the stuff that she's gone through. And then at the very end of the day, you're accused now of hurting your daughter and being responsible. I don't know. I would never have allowed it if I knew what they were doing to her.
Very, very unfortunate. So, I mean, you've got to deal with all this, the unanswered questions, the suspicions, on your family, the suspicions you have of other people that might be involved. And at the end of the day, 34 years later, there's just no answers. There's no resolution. How hopeful are you and your family that one day you're going to find out what happened, or do you think that's not going to happen?
It's kind of like it's a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster. And I'm sorry I get so passionate. I just get so, I get so I get so frustrated and I get so upset. But it's a roller coaster. Some days I'll feel like we just need, I mean, we've come to terms that we know that she's probably not alive. We've just come to terms. You're 34 years later, and you haven't heard from me. They're probably not alive. So we know that, but we want to have her still. We want to have her remains. We want to have her, it's just 34 years is too long. You being in whatever place you were put, we want you here with us so that we can honor you. We can lay you to rest. So I'm not very hopeful. There's days I'm not very hopeful that we'll get a resolution. And then there's other days I feel like, oh, the energy is good and we're getting somewhere and it feels good and I feel good. And then it's like, then it just boom. So it's just a roller coaster. And in the end of the day, like, I know she's with me every day. In fact, today, anytime I'm thinking, it's almost every day, I'll see something, the name Elisa or the initials ER, or like today, I work in a seed certification lab and there's some testing that's done. And the acronym is Elisa. And so I see her name in bold, and I haven't seen that word in a while because I haven't seen that acronym. And so she's always with me and she's always telling me, I'm here with you. Just know I'm here with you. So I always feel like I have a peace knowing that my sister's with me and she's been with me this whole time, just kind of guiding me through life and helping me. And you know what? And that's all that my relationship with my sister, it's something that can never be taken away. Is something special that I had with her, some, bond. My mother, her child can never be taken away from her bond from her child. No one can break that. And as much as people try to ruin that and break it, no one's ever going to break that. So she was our sister. She was our family, nobody can take that away from us. And I'll always have that. It doesn't matter if she's here with us or not. I'll always have that. And I'll always remember her till the day I die. She's always going to be with me. So,
Yeah, well, that's comforting feeling to not have the answers, but you still feel her. So that's good. I am curious as we wrap up here, are there any websites or social media pages or anything that are set up for her case where people can learn more about it or anything?
No, I never thought of that, but I probably should do that. There's a lot of web sleuths out there and people who think they know and people who just talk stupid stuff and people who are sane and stable, and it sounds pretty, but I learned throughout the years that I try not to go out there too much and see what they're posting, because there's a lot of hateful things people can say, and I just don't want to get involved. And I've experienced the worst part of that. And so I just decide, if there's something that I set up, I don't even know if it would do, I'm sure it would do some good, but I don't know if I'm going to have to deal with, open myself up and open my family up to more, attacks and things from the outside. So it's something I probably should look into, but.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely do our part and share the story and get it out there that it's still unsolved. And, odds may be against it, but I hope that somehow your family does one day find out what happened, and whoever's responsible for her disappearance, that they're, identified, and, if they can be brought to justice, that would be good too. But, I really thank you for coming on to discuss your sister's case and enlighten us, because some of the stuff we know is not accurate in the media, and having you here has really helped clarify some stuff. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen and to help me tell my sister's story. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, We're on Facebook at facebook.com/missingpersonspod. We're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us and contact us through our website, missingpersonspodcast.com. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.